If you are watching this, you've probably wondered if you should be shooting in manual. So let's talk about it. Who needs it, why it might be a little bit overrated, and what settings are right for you at your stage in your photography journey. Because while shooting manual is a valuable tool for seasoned photographers, it's often used as a scam by gatekeepers to keep photography hard. And so what do I mean by that? I get DMs from people all the time that have gone on photography courses with impressive National Geographic photographers who have honestly bored them to death and confused it out of them, yapping on about the exposure triangle and shooting manual, which in turn crushes enthusiasm by adding in technical hurdles before we've even got going in photography. And the photographers that are pushing shooting in manual as the most important thing that we need to learn, they are overlooking the art of photography in place of the science of photography. And no one starts photography for the science of it. We get into it because we want to make beautiful images of our lives and our experiences. And I want to share with you a better way to think about your photography so you can go out and take photos that you enjoy. I'm JP, a professional photographer, and I capture content for brands such as Ferrari F1 Team, Puma, and PlayStation. And I'm also the author of a photography book called Street Tools, and I create weekly videos about how we can improve as photographers. And in particular, I made this video because I wish someone had told me about this mindset and these ideas when I was earlier in my journey. So what is a better way to look at this? What do these photographers who preach everyone needs to shoot manual, what do they really mean? Shooting manual gives us the ultimate creative control, but hugely increases the complexity of that process because we have to balance three elements, or all three elements of the pesky exposure triangle: the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO, weighing up each of their upsides and each of their drawbacks to decide where we need to make the trade-off. And camera brands understand that this is complex and quite hard, so they have created 3 different modes, perfect for every level of photographer. And as we move through the modes, we gain more creative control and our images become more consistent in style. However, it creates more roadblocks and we have to apply more mental horsepower in order to achieve the image, and also has a higher percentage of going wrong. So what have we got? We have got fully auto. We have no stylistic creative control. The camera decides everything. It's a proper point and shoot. Camera does what it wants. And this is great for beginners, but not those who want more control. We've then got aperture or shutter priority. And this is where we choose specific settings for, as you guessed it, either the aperture or the shutter speed, because these 2 elements have the greatest impact on how our images will look. The aperture controls how blurry everything is in relation to our subject, and our shutter speed controls how long the sensor is exposed to light, allowing us to create an image where either everything is sharp or where motion is blurred. And intermediates love this type of auto, so they can stylistically control one single element that they want to focus on, that they want to keep consistent, and the camera figures everything else out, continuously adjusting for the available light. And then we have the big bad fully manual, the thing that gatekeepers tell everyone that they need to use because of the ultimate creative control. And so we decide the specific value for each setting, hoping to create a specific desired look, which creates a problem because these settings are always having to change and adapt to the continuously changing light conditions. And if we get this wrong, there is nothing to save us. Our images will come out either too bright or too dark, and this sucks. And experienced photographers who know the shutter speed and the ISO that they need to create the effect they want love this, and it becomes almost second nature. However, photographers who are pushing others towards shooting manual are missing the point. They are setting us up to fail because without enough experience, we'll spend too much time thinking about what exposure settings we need rather than more important elements such as the composition and the timing of our photos. And whether we are on the street or we are with family and friends, we want to be in the moment and not thinking about what our camera is doing. And so I want you to avoid that trap till you are confident in tackling it. To shoot manual, we've got to be pumped about taking photos as well as understanding the fundamental stuff first, so we can chase the art and not the science of photography. And again, if you are watching this, you've considered whether shooting manual is right for you, and that is exactly the right mindset that we need in order to be great photographers. And naturally, I think we're going to always end up shooting manual, and there's a natural kind of progress and process that we'll explain later. But unless you've got a very specific look that we want to create, I would generally shoot to sticking to aperture and shutter priority. Why? These two modes will teach you so much about photography, because by isolating one single variable, we can understand exactly what our images are going to look like. It's also super fast, as the camera is always going to be faster than us at adjusting to the correct exposure settings. Whether that's clouds rolling in, affecting the sunshine, or whether we're going from shooting in the sunshine, doing shade, the levels of light are always changing, and our camera is rapid. So good. One of the best things about modern cameras. And it's almost contrary to what you'd expect and what I said earlier. By setting our aperture or shutter speed, we've got to become more aware of the other settings, because these are now the things that are varying. And so here are some accommodations that we should all be aware of that are going to make our lives infinitely easier and start building out the framework that we need to consider if we're going to be shooting manual later down the line. So we're going to start with quite a common one. If our images start to come out blurry, where not even our subject is crispy and the camera is definitely getting focus, it's usually because our shutter speed has dropped lower than 1/160, and we are getting camera shake in our images, which is where you press the shutter button, and because you're pressing it and your whole body shakes, the camera shakes. And this massively depends on what kind of camera you got, because some are better at dealing with this, some are worse. But increasing your shutter speed to over 1/160 generally starts to solve that issue. And what's great about this is that anything over 1/500 will generally produce the exact same result. The reason for the faster shutter speeds is often to give us more headroom to control our exposure in bright environments, because there's no real difference between 1/2000 and 1/8000 until you're in very specific environments. And if our images are coming out looking noisy or grainy, or I guess the image quality dropping, this is generally because our ISO has been increased. Our cameras have gone, let's send it up. And as a general rule, the lower the ISO, better. And obviously it depends on your camera again, but modern mirrorless cameras are pretty good up to 5000 ISO, but older models might really struggle once you get to about 2000. And in dark environments such as nighttime or in the shade, our ISO and shutter speeds often go haywire in auto modes. If not controlled by us, our camera goes, okay boss, and we'll rocket up the ISO, drop the shutter speed, resulting in images that we don't want. And I find that aperture is a little different in terms of its side effects. When using shutter priority and using a slower shutter speed, our camera will increase the depth of field. And usually when we're starting out, we love a bit of blurry background. It just means that there's instant separation, there's detail contrast between our subject and the background. And so to get this effect, we need to use a wide aperture or small f-stop number. And the easiest but least scientific way to remember this is the f number is how many things you can get in focus at once. f2 is a couple of things compared to f16, which is 16 things. And with all that being said, when all of these trade-offs really start to annoy you enough, that's when you're going to naturally want to start using fully manual. When you're like, I want a fast shutter speed and I want a large depth of field, your auto camera is not going to let you do that. And so you then want to start playing with those settings yourself. And what's even better about this is you don't even have to stick to just shooting some sort of auto mode or shooting fully manual. For my client work, I use manual settings on my Sony kit because I've got a mirrorless camera, I can see through the EVF, and I can instantly see the results of the settings that I'm changing. And it's so easy and quick for me to adjust and adapt my settings that it makes my life so easy. And for client work, when I need to nail it, this is absolutely perfect. And then for my street stuff, when I'm using my Leica, it's always an aperture priority because this ISO button is so slow to adjust. I really don't like it. So I leave it in aperture priority because I set my minimum shutter speed and the camera just does everything else for me. So gang, we just need to be confident in our decisions, to not listen to the gatekeepers that make photography hard. We want to facilitate our own processes and to get after the goal of taking the best photos we can. So if you've got any questions, leave them down in the comments below. Until next time, see you in the street.